I'm 41, and 2 months ago I thought my life was exactly where I wanted it to be. Steady marriage, decent job, quiet home in the suburbs. Nothing glamorous, but comfortable. Then, one Tuesday night, I came home to find my husband sitting at our kitchen table with a woman I had never seen before, holding our spare house key. He didn't introduce her right away, which was weird enough. I had to pull it out of him. Her name was Marcy. She was going through something, and apparently she'd be staying in our guest room for a little while. He said it so casually, like he'd just picked up an extra bag of groceries on the way home. I remember standing there with my work bag still on my shoulder, trying to figure out why my husband had given a total stranger a key to our house without so much as texting me first. The way Marcy looked at him, he explained they shared some private joke I wasn't in on, made my stomach. It wasn't just her moving in without my consent that bothered me. It was the way she didn't seem remotely nervous, apologetic. She smiled like she already belonged there. She'd been waiting for this moment. My husband, he didn't look uncomfortable. If anything, he looked... I didn't know then that this little while stretched far beyond anything, or that by the time I was going on, I'd be watching my marriage disintegrate from the sidelines, able to stop it, while Marcy made herself more and more at home. The first night she stayed, I barely slept. Every time I heard a creak in the hallway, I tensed up. I kept expecting my husband to come in and explain himself, to at least try to make me feel better about this bizarre situation. He stayed up with him until after, their voices low and hushed. The next morning, I found her in my kitchen, using my mug, humming like she'd lived here for years. She greeted me with this overly sweet "good morning," and told me she'd gone grocery shopping for the three of us, while I was still asleep. Apparently, she'd been given my debit card. My husband's idea, of course. I wanted to ask 100 questions, but I bit my tongue because he had that look. The one where his jaw tightens just enough to warn me not to start an argument in front of someone else. It's the same look he used to give when his mother came over unannounced, and I complained. By the end of the week, her stuff was everywhere. Shoes by the front door, her coat hanging next to mine, even her toiletries lined up in the bathroom we share. She started cooking dinner most nights, always for the three of us, as if I'd agreed to be part of this cozy little... What got me most was how quickly I adjusted to her being here. No awkwardness, no boundaries. They laughed together in the kitchen, traded inside jokes, and she even started calling him by a nickname. He didn't correct. It was like I'd become a guest in my... and I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just been replaced, quietly, efficiently, and without a single word. It was about 10 days in when the first undeniable red flag hit me square in the face. I'd come home early from work because a meeting got cancelled. Normally, in catching them in the living room, watching TV or cooking, always together. But that day, the house was... I called out his name. No answer. I set my bag down and started toward the hallway when I heard a door not slam, just a carrot click. The kind of quiet close you do when you don't want someone to... A few seconds later, Marcy came to our bedroom. She didn't look startled. She didn't even try to explain. She just smiled faintly, almost smug, and brushed past me, saying something. I stood frozen, staring at the door she'd just come from. My husband emerged less than a minute later, looking like nothing was out of place. He claimed he'd been looking for a sweater, and Marcy had just helped him find it. I wanted to scream, but instead I just nodded, like I believed him. Because in that moment I realized I needed to be careful. If something was really happening, confronting them without proof would only make them better at hiding it. So I decided to watch, to listen, and to wait, no matter how much it killed me, to catch them in a way that neither of them could talk their way out of. From that day on, I became hyper-aware of everything. Every glance, every laugh, every subtle touch between them. I started noticing patterns. They always seemed to disappear at the same times. Right after dinner, late at night when I went to shower, and in the mornings, when I was getting ready for work. The little changes in my husband were impossible to ignore. He started wearing cologne more often, even on days when he wasn't going anywhere. He'd shower late at night instead of in the morning, which he'd never done before. His phone, which used to be left lying around on the counter, was suddenly glued to him, face down, always locked. Marcy, on the other hand, became bolder. She started borrowing my clothes without asking. I'd find my sweater draped over the back of the couch, or my scarf hanging in the hallway. She'd joke about how sharing is caring, but it didn't feel like a joke. It felt like she was testing me, inch by inch, to see how far she could push. One evening, I overheard them in the kitchen. I couldn't make out every word, but I caught enough, her telling him in a soft voice that she didn't want to be the reason for anything. His reply was muffled, but I swear I heard him say, "It's already done." That sentence stuck in my head like a splinter. What was already done? What decision had he made that I hadn't been told about? I started to think maybe the truth was worse than I was ready to hear, but by then it was too late to back out. I was in it now, whether I wanted to be or not. It happened on a Friday night. I'd been invited to a coworker's birthday dinner but bailed last minute because something in me just couldn't leave the house that night. Call it intuition, paranoia, whatever it was. It kept me home. Around 9 p.m., I was upstairs in the bedroom, pretending to read, when I heard music start playing downstairs. Not the kind of background music you put on while cleaning, but slow, intimate, candlelight kind of music. I crept halfway down the stairs, careful not to let them hear me. From where I stood, I had a clear view into the living room. There were 2 wine glasses on the coffee table, the good set we usually saved for anniversaries. A half-empty bottle sat between them. Marcy was curled up at one end of the couch, legs tucked under her, wearing one of my cardigans. My husband was on the other end, until she shifted closer, close enough that their knees touched. I watched him reach up and brush her hair back from her face. She smiled, slow, knowing, and leaned in like it was the most natural thing in the world. He didn't pull away. He didn't even look toward the stairs. The thought of me catching them never crossed his mind. I backed away before I saw more. My chest felt tight. My ears were ringing, and for the first time since she moved in, I knew, without a doubt, that whatever was between them wasn't just friendship. Up until then, I'd been holding on to this desperate hope that maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was just imagining, but hope doesn't survive a moment like it was gone. I didn't sleep that night. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, replaying every detail I'd just witnessed. By sunrise, the hurt had turned into something sharper, cold, deliberate. I wasn't going to confront them in the heat of the moment. No, I was going to be smarter than that. If they were going to treat me like a fool, I'd make sure they regretted it. That meant one thing: proof, the kind they couldn't deny or twist into something else. I started small. The next morning, I told my husband I was going to spend the weekend at my sister's house. He didn't even ask why. He just said, okay, like it was a relief. That alone told me everything I needed to know. Before I left, I set up a small camera on the bookshelf in the living room, disguised as a decorative clock. It wasn't high-tech, just enough to capture what happened when I wasn't there. I also tucked a cheap voice recorder between the couch cushions, right where they liked to sit. Then I actually did leave, at least for a few hours. I went to a coffee shop with my laptop, but I couldn't focus on anything except wondering what I'd come home to. When I finally returned that evening, both of them were in the kitchen, laughing like they didn't have a care in the world. I acted casual, asked how their day was, but inside I was already burning to see the footage. Later that night, when they were both asleep, I locked myself in the bathroom with my laptop and the camera's memory card. What I saw in the first 15 minutes made my hands go cold. It wasn't just wine and knee-touching. The footage started innocently enough, him on the couch, her in the kitchen pouring wine. But as the minutes passed, the distance between them vanished. She sat down beside him, close enough, their shoulders. They talked, laughed, and then, without hesitation, reached over and rested his hand on her. She didn't flinch. In fact, she leaned in, resting her head on his. It was the most natural. My stomach turned as I kissed the top, then her temple, lingering like he'd done it. It wasn't one moment of weakness. This was comfortable, practiced. The voice recorder caught the rest. Their conversation wasn't just flirtation, it was plans. She told him she loved waking up in our house, that it felt like home. He said he didn't see a reason for her to leave. At one point, she even joked about moving her stuff into our bedroom, and he didn't laugh it off. He said, maybe. Hearing that single word from his mouth hit harder than anything I'd seen. I sat there in the bathroom, the sound of their voices in my ears. The image of them burned into my brain, and I realized something. I wasn't just competing for my marriage anymore. I was already out of it. They'd just forgotten to tell me. By the time the sun came up, I'd already mapped out my next move. I wasn't going to confront him in private. He'd just lie, twist the story, and make me out to be paranoid. No, I wanted witnesses, people who'd see him for exactly what he was. That Saturday, I texted a few mutual friends and invited them over for a casual game night. Nothing big, just enough of an audience to make sure the truth couldn't be buried. I made sure to invite his sister too, the one who still thought he could do no wrong. All day, I acted normal. I chatted with Marcy in the kitchen, even let her borrow one of my sweaters when she complained about being cold. Inside, though, I was holding back the urge to throw her out onto the lawn with all her bags. When everyone arrived that evening, I waited until they'd settled in, drinks in hand, laughing over some dumb card game. Then I pulled out my laptop, plugged it into the TV, and said I had something funny to. The room went quiet. At first, they didn't seem to get it, just my husband and Marcy sitting on when his hand slid on, when she leaned into him, when his lips touched her hair. That's when his sister's face went. One of our friends actually set his drink down and muttered, "Holy shit." And I just sat there, calm, watching him realize the walls were closing in. The second the clip ended, the room was dead silent, except for him. He shot up from the couch, eyes darting between me, the TV, and everyone staring at him. His voice came out shaky at first, insisting it was taken out of context, that nothing had actually happened. But then Marcy spoke. She didn't deny it. She didn't even look embarrassed. Instead, she crossed her arms, leaned back in her seat, and said, "Well, at least now you don't have to hide it." Gasps went around the room. His sister's jaw dropped. He turned on her like she'd just betrayed him, hissing her name through clenched teeth, but the damage was already done. Every ounce of doubt anyone might have had evaporated with that one sentence. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just looked at him and said, "You told her she could have my home. Now you can both have it." Then I stood up, walked to the kitchen, and slid a manila envelope across the counter toward him. Inside were printed screenshots from the voice recorder's transcripts, copies of the footage, on top, my signed divorce paper. The room stayed quiet as he opened it, his face turning a deep shade of red. He didn't try to speak again. Marcy grabbed her coat without a word. They walked out together, and for the first time in weeks, the house felt like... After the door slammed, nobody moved for a solid minute. Then, slowly, the tension broke. His sister came over first, still pale, and muttered he was so sorry. A couple of friends hugged me, others their heads in disbelief, kept telling them I was fine. Truth was, I felt hollow, been holding my breath for... and still couldn't quite exhale. That night, I slept in my bed alone for the first time in what felt like... No muffled whispers down the hall, no wine glasses clinking in the kitchen, just quiet. 2 days later, I came home from work to find the guest room empty. Marcy's things were gone, and so were most of his. He'd left my house key on the counter with a note that simply said, "You'll regret this." I didn't, not for a second. A week after that, a mutual friend told me they'd been spotted together at a bar, already arguing in public. Apparently, whatever they thought they had didn't survive once they didn't have me to hide it from. I won't pretend it didn't feel good hearing that. The divorce went through faster than I expected. I kept the house, the savings, and my peace of mind. He walked away with nothing but his pride, and even that seemed dented. Looking back, I think the worst part wasn't losing my marriage. It was realizing how easily he'd let someone else slide into my life, like I was just replaceable. But in the end, I got something better than closure. I got my life back, on my own terms. And as for Marcy, I hope she enjoys living with a man who showed her exactly how little loyalty means to him. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that how you get someone is usually how you lose them.